John, do you want to add something? I see you leaning forward.
Well, I do think that idea of that a powerful united Germany would be a threat to its neighbors again also existed somewhat in the East. And, I give Helmut Kohl credit for assuaging those feelings. And also Germany has shown restraint in its foreign policy. I do think we see interesting challenges now when Russia is clearly internationally becoming more aggressive and expansive, and we have very far right parties emerging in parts of Eastern Europe, and also a vocal minority in Germany. Where will that stability come in the future, especially after Britain leaves?
Carol, that leads me to you. I want to ask you about Russian-U.S. relations today and how Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin's relationship really, in some ways, takes us back to those days, right, before the fall, and the patriarchy that I know you are very interested in.
Well, it's sort of a slightly different point that I want to make, if you don't mind. I just want to throw out there for everyone's consideration the idea that actually we lost the Cold War, that we lost it together with the Soviet Union, and that we lost it because we bankrupted our country building what Eisenhower rightfully called a military-industrial complex, which was not dismantled in the wake of the end of the Cold War. But not only that, we allowed ourselves a kind of triumphalism about the victory of our system, which embedded certain things that have proved to be not so healthy for our country. And, what Andy just said about, there's a chair and a socialist chair, and the socialist chair is an electric chair, and the notion of any of the ideas of the left about universal health care and about universal education and about bridling capitalism rather than allowing it to be unbridled, those were all discredited. And the idea that Reagan was the great hero of the Cold War who brought down the wall, whereas I believe that Gorbachev was the hero of the Cold War who more than any other historical figure was responsible for the peaceful end of the Eastern Bloc. But that's not the narrative that dominates in our country, and I think to our detriment. And I think in the language of today's youths, it reinforced the white patriarchy. And I mean that with all due love to the white gentleman that I'm on the panel with, but I think you all know what I mean. A system that was so sure of its own rightness that it became unwilling to change and to consider many of the social programs that might have made American capitalism a little bit less cruel. And I think has not been good for our country to think of ourselves as the victor in the Cold War.
And Gorbachev was the hero because he didn't send the tanks into the streets. Is that the bottom line?
I hate to describe him as a hero because he was vainglorious and he talked too much and he was so limited in so many ways and so blind. And as you say, he thought he could reform things that he couldn't reform. There's so many things he didn't understand. I hate to call him a hero, but he was a man who did not use violence, and that was the signature achievement of his era.
I just add, I think I sort of always oppose the idea of sort of identifying one person as the hero here. I mean, I think it is the case. I think, first of all, for me, a lot of the heroes are the folks who started those movements, whether it was Solidarity, Charter 77, some of the Soviet dissidents, the democratic opposition in Hungary, all that put pressure on the system.
JP2.
Excuse me?
JP2.
JP2, absolutely, yes. The Polish Pope, yes, was. I think it's no accident that in he was elected in '78. Solidarity really took off shortly thereafter. And he didn't have to be overtly political to do that. Just to say, you have to speak the truth was subversive enough. But in terms of the major players, I think it is a combination of Reagan, Gorbachev, Thatcher, and John Paul. All of them played separate roles, and I don't think one has to be and how they understood their roles. But I do give Reagan a lot of credit for his instincts, and then also how he dealt with Maggie Thatcher, and then. And by the way, it's interesting the different reactions. I remember being in Poland in 1988 again, and talking to solidarity activists. And this was a time when people were really, Reagan was still president, but people were really, really tired of him for domestic reasons in the States. And the most frequent question I had is, can't he run for a third term?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I remember making the first real friend I made in the Soviet Union was a Russian journalist who worked for Literaturная Gazeta,
Yes.
which you will remember, Andy. And I remember him saying to me, so remember when Reagan said that thing about the evil empire? And I, being a good liberal, was like, oh, yeah, God, yeah, I'm so sorry. And he said, no, that was the best day of my life.
Yeah.
And that was really an education.
Yeah.
I never forgot that.
Yeah.